Hey guys, also we are going to follow up with what we were working on last week. Last week you guys did a couple problems on the number of spring rolls and the number of people that it um, could feed, and then you guys also fed a crowd by looking at cups of dry rice and the number of people. So we're going to move on to this week's problem. This week's is going to come from also from introducing proportional relationships, and we're specifically looking at relationships and how to write our equations. So we are going to look at the problem of 4.3 Denver to Chicago. So one of the things I would encourage you is to take good notes. You'll notice that when you go to open up the Google Doc to complete, you're going to see some very familiar problems from today. So you want to take good notes, or if you have an opportunity to do dual device, I would open up the video on one device and I would open up the document on your other device. And so Denver to Chicago. So a plane flew at a constant speed between Denver and Chicago. It took the plane 1.5 hours to fly 915 miles. And so it wants us to complete the table. And you'll notice that the information from the story problem is already partially inputted in there. And so that's the 1.5 hours and the 915 miles. And so up to this point, we've just had an X and a Y table. You'll notice that today that there's going to be a third column that we're going to work with. So let's go through and look at what our X value is. And our X value in this particular one is going to be our time. And our Y is going to be the distance. And if you remember last week, we came up with a formula for constant of proportionality. And we said that K, which is constant of proportionality, is equal to Y over X. Okay. And so let's look at what 915 over 1.5 looks like. And so we're going to write our Y, 915, over our X, 1.5. And when we divide that, we get 610. And so to go from our X column to our Y column, we must be multiplying by the number of 610. So we can do that all the way throughout our entire table. So we've got 1 times 610, which would be 610 here. 2 times 610 is going to give us 1220. 2.5 times 610 is going to give us 1525. And then t times 610, so this is an unknown number of time. So it shouldn't matter how many hours or how many minutes, less than an hour, that I complete a trip, I'm still going to multiply that variable by 610. So this would be just 610 t. All right. So this next part that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and complete our third column, our speed. And so speed says miles per hour. Okay, so miles per hour. So I can write that as a ratio of 610 over 1, or it'll be 610. And we're going to go ahead and abbreviate miles per hour here. Okay, let's look at this next one. 915 over 1.5. When we divide those two, you'll notice it's also 610 miles per hour. Same thing with here. Whoops. Divided by 2. $15.25 divided by 2.5 is 610. And then, of course, this one right here, 610 t over t, and you're going to notice that these are going to cancel each other out, okay? And I have just the 610, okay? If you go back and you read the problem itself specifically said that it was flying at a constant rate. So remember, when we're talking about constant rate, it's the same speed all the way throughout the duration of the trip, okay? So it was at a constant speed. All right. So let's look at our first set of problems, and we're going to refer back to our data table as we go through when we do these. Okay, so the first question said, how far does the plane fly in 1 hour? So if I look back at my table, I'm going to notice that 1 hour said 610 miles. And so it flew 610 miles. Okay. Our third question, how far would the plane fly in T hours at this speed? Okay. Again, we talked about this bottom part, this unknown. Doesn't matter how many hours, whether it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or something that's not even on the table. It would not matter. And so because I don't know how many hours are spending, except where it says T hours, and I'm still going at that same speed, 610 T, okay? And all they're basically saying is 610 times whatever T is, and that would get me my speed, or my distance. All right? Let's look at question 4. And so question 4 says if D, and they're talking about the variable D. Okay, we're gonna talk about what that is here in just a second. If D represents the distance that the plane flies at the speed for T hours, write an equation that relates T and D. And so that's what this whole purpose of this particular unit has been talking to us about, is taking information from a table and being able to write our equation. And so a couple things that this one actually talks about. This one says D represents distance, okay? The plane flies at this speed, so there's a piece of information that I need for T and then hours, okay? And it wants us to write an equation that relates T and D. So I know that at some point T and D are going to be part of my equation. And so if I'm looking at the speed formula, so think back in science, in 7th grade we talked about speed, and the speed formula is speed equals distance over time. Okay, I always take the distance that I am at and I multiply it by the time, or divide it by time. And that's going to always give me my speed. If you look over here, we did that on the chart already. We took distance and we divided it by time. We need to be able to write an equation for any time that this happens. Okay, and there's some information that we have. We know what this speed is. Our constant rate has been 610 every time. Okay, and so I can rewrite my equation. Okay, I can rewrite my equation. If I want to just solve for D, I need to get D by itself. In order to get D by itself, I have to get rid of this T. So right now the T is being divided, so I want to multiply the T to both sides. The T's cancel out over here, and I'm left with just the D. And over here I have S times T. We're going to take that formula and we're going to write it over here. So I'm going to write it backwards, or write it the other direction. D for distance, D equals speed times time. So let's fill in this piece of information. I don't know what D is. There's nothing about distance in my story problem. There's nothing about the amount of time that I spend in my story problem. But it said at this speed. This speed is referring to that 610. So I'm going to rewrite and add in the information that I know is D equals 610 T. And if you think about this, this is exactly what we did in our table right here. We took the distance, okay? We took the 1 times the 610 to get our distance on every one of those. All right? Let's look at our last question. Our last question says, how far would the plane fly in 3 hours at this speed? 3.5 hours, and explain and show our reasoning. And so let's think about what we're doing, okay? We already know what our time is. We're trying to find out what our distance is, so let's plug in some numbers. So distance equals 3 times 610, okay? 3 times 610 is 1,830. Okay, I'm going to be able to travel 1,830 miles. Wants to know what is in 3.5 hours. D equals 3.5 times 610. Okay? And that's going to be 2,135 miles. Okay? So just like I was saying before, this is a quick tie-up. This is actually, we're getting down to the very last lesson. We got one more lesson to do in this unit before we cap it out and move on. We'll be doing graphing next, but this is the last part of the equations. We'll have one more practice problem tomorrow. Guys, if you have any questions at all, you need to email me or shoot me a message through Teams. You need to go through the math classroom to send me a message. You can no longer do it through the chat window. They've blocked you on that part, but you are to do it through the classroom in Microsoft Teams. If not, you can send me an email, and that'll work just as well, so that you guys can get your questions answered. Please be trying this. Remember, 7th graders, you've got 8th grade math coming up next year. My 8th graders, you guys have high school algebra coming through. Okay, this is an important concept. I know it's hard. I know things are difficult for you guys right now, but I'm not asking much. Like I said, when you pull up that Google Docs, I think you guys will be plentiful surprised. As long as you're paying attention to the video, you should do just fine on the assignment. Have a great week. I miss you guys, and make us proud. Have a great week.